The first thing my daughter-in-law did after my son's funeral was try to get into my office. Not cry, not sit with family, not even ask how I was holding up after burying my only child. She went straight for the second-floor office at Walker Industrial Supply with a leather folder under her arm and a locksmith standing behind her like she'd planned it before the cemetery dirt had settled. And that was the exact moment I realized two things. First, my son had hidden things from me. Second, thank God I never told either of them where the business actually belonged. The receptionist called me while I was sitting in my truck outside St. Mark's Cemetery, still wearing the black tie from the funeral. "Mr. Walker, Vanessa's here," she whispered nervously. "She says she needs access to the executive accounts immediately." I stared through the windshield at the rain sliding down the glass. "Is she alone?" There's a locksmith here too." That sent ice through my veins. Not grief, not shock, fear, real fear. Because nobody hires a locksmith 30 minutes after a funeral unless they think there's something valuable locked behind a door. I drove back to the office harder than a 62-year-old man probably should have. By the time I got there, Vanessa stood outside my office in a cream-colored coat, heels clicking against the hardwood floor while the locksmith knelt beside the handle. She didn't even look embarrassed. "Frank," she said calmly, "there are urgent financial matters Ethan handled personally." The locksmith awkwardly stood up. "You want me to wait outside?" "Yes," I snapped. He disappeared down the hallway. Vanessa crossed her arms. Perfect makeup, dry eyes, diamond earrings I knew my son couldn't afford when he bought them. "He told me where everything was," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "He didn't." Her expression changed for half a second. Tiny crack in the mask. Then she recovered. "I'm his wife. And I'm his father." Silence stretched between us like piano wire. The office around us still smelled like Ethan's cologne. He'd worked here since college. Learned shipping schedules before he could legally drink. Ate vending machine dinners during inventory weeks. I used to think one day the company would belong to him. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I gave him too much too early. Vanessa slowly opened the leather folder in her hands. Inside were bank printouts, insurance papers, property documents, and one page with numbers highlighted in yellow. "How much is Walker Industrial actually worth?" she asked. Not, "Was Ethan happy?" Not, "How are we surviving this?" That question, right there, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Because suddenly my son's death, the boating accident everybody called tragic and unfortunate, didn't feel quite so simple anymore. 3 nights earlier, Ethan had called me at 11:47 p.m. I almost didn't answer because we'd argued that week. A stupid argument about money. But I picked up anyway. "Dad," he whispered. Not talked. Whispered. Like somebody might hear him. "I need to ask you something." "What is it?" Long silence. Then, "If something happens to me, who controls the company?" I laughed back then. Thought he was being dramatic. Now, standing across from his widow while rain hammered the office windows, I realized that may have been the most important question my son ever asked me. And thank God I lied to him. I didn't answer Vanessa right away. I just looked at those papers in her hands and tried to ignore the pressure building behind my ribs. 40 years in business teaches a man when somebody's asking a question and when they already think they know the answer. Vanessa believed Walker Industrial belonged to Ethan. That meant Ethan had believed it too. And suddenly that late-night phone call didn't sound emotional anymore. It sounded frightened. "How much is the company worth?" she repeated. "Enough to keep the lights on," I said coldly. "Frank, this isn't the time for games." "No," I replied. "It's exactly the time for games. Because my son's been dead for 6 hours, and you brought a locksmith." Her jaw tightened. For the first time since I'd met her, the sweetness disappeared from her face completely. Underneath the polished smile and soft voice was something harder, colder. "You don't understand the situation Ethan left me in." That word caught my attention. Left. Not we. Not our situation. His. I stepped closer. "What exactly did my son tell you before he died?" Vanessa hesitated just a little too long. That he was restructuring things. My stomach turned. Ethan had no authority to restructure anything significant. He managed operations, client relationships, warehouse contracts, but ownership, legal control, that was another world entirely. A world I had deliberately kept hidden. 10 years earlier, after a competitor sued us over a workplace accident, my attorney, Harold Levin, practically forced me into creating the trust. You built something valuable, Harold told me back then. Someday somebody will try to take it from your family. Plan accordingly. At the time, I thought he meant competitors. I never imagined he might have meant family itself. Vanessa tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and lowered her voice. Frank, Ethan said there were documents in your office safe. Now my blood really ran cold. Because there was a safe, and almost nobody knew about it. How do you know that? He told me. No, I said quietly. Somebody else did. That landed harder than I expected. Her expression flickered again, nervous this time. Tiny signs. Most people miss them. I spent decades negotiating contracts with men trying to hide millions behind smiles. You learn to see cracks. And Vanessa was cracking. Then my phone buzzed. Harold Levin. I stepped away and answered immediately. Where are you? He asked. At the office. Leave. Right now. My pulse spiked. What happened? I just got a call from county police, he said carefully. Frank, Ethan's accident report changed. I felt the hallway tilt under my feet. What do you mean changed? They found bruising on his wrist inconsistent with the original statement. I looked directly at Vanessa. She was watching me too carefully. Harold, I said slowly, what exactly are you telling me? Long silence. Then the old lawyer spoke in the quietest voice I'd ever heard from him. I'm saying your son may not have fallen out of that boat by accident. Every sound in the office disappeared. The rain, the phones, the hum of fluorescent lights. Gone. All I could hear was Ethan's voice from 3 nights earlier. If something happens to me, who controls the company? Vanessa took a step toward me. What did he say? I ended the call without answering. Then I noticed something I should have seen immediately. The leather folder in her hands wasn't closed anymore, and inside it was a photocopy of the trust's original formation document. A document locked in Harold Levin's private archive. A document Ethan himself had never seen, which meant somebody had been digging into my family's finances behind my back for a long time. And judging by the look in Vanessa's eyes, she thought she was running out of time. I kept staring at that photocopy while my mind tried to catch up with what my eyes already understood. Nobody outside 3 people should have known that trust existed. Me, my attorney Harold Levin, and my accountant, Denise Mercer. That was it. Ethan didn't know the details. I made sure of that. Not because I didn't trust my son, at least that's what I told myself for years, but because wealth changes people. Expectations change people faster. And Vanessa? She had walked into my office carrying proof that somebody had opened doors buried for a decade. Where did you get that? I asked. She closed the folder instantly. It doesn't matter. It matters a hell of a lot. Her eyes hardened. You think I'm stupid, Frank? Ethan told me enough. I know the company's protected. Protected. Interesting word. Not owned. Not shared. Protected. Somebody had educated her. And there was only one reason people suddenly become interested in trusts and asset protection. They think money's about to move. I walked past her and unlocked my office door. The locksmith looked relieved to disappear downstairs when I waved him away. Vanessa followed me inside without asking permission. The room felt wrong without Ethan sitting across from my desk arguing about logistics or payroll schedules. His coffee mug still sat beside the computer monitor. University of Georgia. Chips on the rim from years of abuse. I couldn't stop seeing him at 12 years old running through this office pretending he owned the place. Maybe that's where I failed him. Maybe I raised him believing the business was already his. Vanessa shut the door behind her. Open the safe, she said. I turned slowly. That's not how this works. It is if Ethan named me beneficiary. I almost laughed. Almost. Because now we were finally getting somewhere. Beneficiary. Not grieving widow. Not confused spouse. This was about inheritance. About control. About money. You seem awfully prepared for somebody whose husband died 2 days ago. A flash of anger crossed her face. You have no idea what Ethan was dealing with. Then explain it to me. She folded her arms tightly. He was scared. That hit me harder than I expected. Because Ethan almost never admitted fear. Even as a kid, he'd broken his wrist falling off a dirt bike and told the ER nurse he was fine. Scared of what? I asked quietly. Vanessa looked away toward the rain-covered windows. Debt. That word stunned me. Impossible. It wasn't gambling, she snapped quickly. Or drugs. Nothing like that. Then where did hundreds of thousands of dollars go? Hundreds of thousands. I felt the air leave my lungs. Ethan had hidden debt from me? No, not hidden. Impossible to hide completely. Unless somebody helped him move money. My eyes drifted toward the painting behind my desk, an old oil landscape my wife bought at an antique market 25 years ago. Behind it sat the wall safe. Vanessa noticed immediately, and that tiny movement of her eyes told me everything. She already knew exactly where it was. The room suddenly felt dangerous. Not physically, strategically, like I was 3 moves behind in a chess game I didn't even know had started. Then my office phone rang. Not my cell, the landline. Almost nobody used that number anymore. I answered cautiously. "This is Frank." Heavy breathing. Then a voice I recognized instantly. Denise Mercer, my accountant. And she sounded terrified. "Frank," she whispered, "don't open the safe." Every muscle in my body tightened. Why? Silence. Then, because somebody already beat us to it. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the safe behind the painting while Denise's words echoed in my ear. Somebody already beat us to it. What are you talking about? I whispered. Denise sounded like she was hiding somewhere. I checked the archive this morning after Harold called me. 2 folders are missing. My pulse started hammering. Which folders? The amended trust schedules and Ethan's authorization records. I felt my stomach drop. Vanessa was watching my face carefully now, trying to read every reaction. "Frank," Denise continued, "listen to me very carefully. Don't trust anybody until we know what Ethan was doing." The line went dead. I slowly lowered the receiver. Vanessa stepped closer immediately. What happened? I ignored her and crossed the office toward the painting. Every instinct I had screamed not to open that safe in front of her. But another instinct, the older one that built my company from a warehouse with leaking pipes and 1 forklift, told me something worse. If documents were missing, then somebody already had access. Keeping secrets now might be useless. I lifted the painting off the wall. Vanessa inhaled sharply. There it was. Black steel safe. Digital keypad. Still locked. At least on the outside. "You knew about this all along," she said quietly. "I know a lot of things." My hands hovered over the keypad. The code was Ethan's birthday backward. Stupid choice. Sentimental choice. The kind old men make when they start caring more about memories than security. I entered the numbers. The lock clicked. When the heavy door swung open, I immediately knew Denise was right. The inside looked disturbed. Folders tilted sideways. Empty space where thick binders should have been. And 1 yellow envelope torn open. My breathing slowed into something cold and controlled. That happened whenever disaster hit. Other men panicked. I got quiet. Years ago, during a warehouse fire, my employees screamed while smoke filled the loading dock. I remember calmly grabbing extinguishers and directing people outside like we were rehearsing a drill. Panic wastes time. And right now time mattered. I pulled the remaining folders onto the desk. Insurance records, property deeds, tax filings. But the trust amendments were gone. Exactly the documents that explained who inherited operational control if I died. Or if Ethan did. Vanessa's voice came softer now. "Frank, maybe we should call the police." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Perfect posture. Controlled breathing. No tears. No shock over missing legal documents. Nothing. Then I noticed something else. Her left hand was trembling slightly. Not grief. Nerves. "You already knew something was missing," I said. Her expression froze. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You think I robbed your safe?" "I think my son died asking questions about ownership." I stepped closer. "And now documents disappear before he's even buried." Her mask finally cracked. "You have no idea what Ethan got himself into." There it was again. Fear. Real fear this time. Not greed. Not manipulation. Fear. Before I could push further, headlights flashed across the office windows from the parking lot below. A black SUV. Then another. 3 men stepped out wearing dark jackets despite the Georgia heat. Not police. Too coordinated. Too calm. Vanessa went pale the instant she saw them. And that reaction scared me more than the men themselves. "Who are they?" I asked. She backed away from the window. "We need to leave." "Answer me." "They're here for Ethan." The elevator downstairs dinged. A second later, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside my office. Slow. Confident. Not the footsteps of men asking permission. Then came 3 hard knocks on the door. Boom. 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 Nobody inside moved. A voice spoke from the hallway. "Mr. Walker," the man called calmly. "We know the safe is open." Silence swallowed the room. Then he added one sentence that made every hair on my neck stand up. And we believe your daughter-in-law has something that belongs to us. Nobody moved. The knocking stopped, but the men outside didn't leave. I could hear them shifting in the hallway. Calm, patient. The kind of patience that comes from knowing eventually a locked door becomes an open one. Vanessa looked like all the blood had drained from her body. That terrified me more than the threats. Because until that moment, some stubborn part of me still believed this was about inheritance drama. Hidden debt. Maybe fraud. But fear like that? That came from something uglier. I quietly closed the safe door. Who are they? I asked again. Vanessa swallowed hard. I don't know their names. That's not an answer. Her voice cracked for the first time. Ethan borrowed money. I stared at her. How much? She looked away. Almost 400,000. The number hit me like a baseball bat to the chest. $400,000. My son wasn't reckless enough to burn through that kind of money on cars and vacations. Even with Vanessa's expensive tastes, it didn't add up. What for? No answer. I stepped toward her. What did my son do? Another knock hit the door. This time softer. Almost polite. Mr. Walker, the voice called again. We're trying to handle this respectfully. Respectfully. Men who use that word while hunting debts are usually the least respectful people alive. Vanessa rubbed her shaking hands together. It started last year, she whispered. Ethan thought he could expand the company faster. I felt sick immediately. Expansion. Of course. For 2 years, Ethan had pushed me to open a second distribution hub in Nashville. Bigger loans. More inventory. More risk. I refused every time. Walker Industrial survived because I never gambled what I couldn't replace. But Ethan belonged to a different generation. Faster money. Faster growth. Everybody trying to become a millionaire before 40. He said you treated him like an employee instead of family. Vanessa continued quietly. That hurt more than I expected. Because maybe it was true. I loved my son, but I ran the company like a battlefield. No shortcuts. No entitlement. Everybody earned their place, including him. Especially him. He found private investors, she said. I almost laughed from disbelief. No legitimate investor sends men like these. He didn't know that at first. The hallway went silent again. Too silent. That's when I realized they were listening, probably standing inches from the door. I lowered my voice. What did they want in return? Vanessa looked directly at me. The company. Cold spread through my chest. Not repayment. Control. Suddenly, everything connected at once. The questions about the trust. The missing documents. Ethan asking who controlled ownership if something happened to him. Dear God, my son had tried to leverage a company he didn't legally own. And somebody found out. I walked to the window carefully and peeked through the blinds. 3 men downstairs. One at the elevator. One near the stairwell. One directly outside my office door. Professionals. Not random thugs. Then I noticed the oldest one downstairs holding a familiar blue folder under his arm. My blood froze. Harold Levin's archive folders. They already had the trust documents, which meant this wasn't a break-in anymore. This was leverage. Behind me, Vanessa suddenly whispered. He was trying to fix it before you found out. I turned sharply. What do you mean fix it? Tears finally appeared in her eyes. Real ones. Ethan wanted to pay them back before the audit next month. He thought if he could move control temporarily. You can't move control, I snapped. That trust can't be touched without me. That's what he told them. Silence. Then understanding hit me like lightning. Ethan hadn't been scared of debt. He'd been scared because he promised criminals something impossible to deliver. And if that was true, maybe my son's boating accident wasn't punishment. Maybe it was a warning. Then the man outside the office door spoke again. Only this time, his voice lost all politeness. Mr. Walker, he said calmly, open the door now. A long pause followed. Then, or we start discussing what really happened to your son. The room went dead silent. Vanessa covered her mouth, and for the first time since Ethan died, she looked less like a calculating widow and more like a terrified woman trapped inside something she no longer controlled. I kept staring at the door. Every instinct told me not to open it. But another instinct, the one that spent 40 years negotiating with dangerous men in loading docks, union offices, and backroom contract meetings, knew something important. Men like this don't threaten. Not unless they already think they've won. I looked at Vanessa. Did they kill him? Her face crumpled instantly. No, she whispered. No, I swear to God. But she couldn't hold eye contact. That was enough. I walked slowly back behind my desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside sat a revolver I hadn't touched in years. Smith & Wesson. 38. My father's gun. Vanessa inhaled sharply. You can't seriously think. I seriously think my son is dead. Another knock came. Impatient now. You're making this harder than necessary, the man outside said. I checked the revolver cylinder. Loaded. Funny thing about getting older, your hands stop shaking in moments where younger men panic. You've already survived enough disasters to understand fear doesn't help. I looked at Vanessa again. Start from the beginning. Tears rolled down her cheeks now. It was supposed to be temporary, she whispered. Ethan met them through a logistics broker in Savannah. They said they funded regional expansion projects. I almost laughed at how naive that sounded. They loaned him $400,000. At first, only $100,000. And then, he lost it. My stomach tightened. How? He bought inventory after a supplier promised a military contract that never happened. Classic mistake. Young businessmen think growth fixes problems. Old businessmen know growth usually creates them. He tried borrowing more to cover the losses, she continued. Then shipping costs jumped, payroll got tight, and he started moving money between accounts. Illegal. Jesus Christ. Did he steal from the company? No, she snapped immediately. Not at first. Not at first. Those 3 words hollowed me out. Outside, footsteps moved farther down the hallway. The men were repositioning. Waiting. Listening. Vanessa wiped her face. 2 months ago, they demanded collateral. The company. She nodded weakly. But Ethan finally admitted he didn't legally own it. I closed my eyes briefly. My son must have been terrified. Cornered men make desperate decisions. And Ethan had inherited my stubbornness without inheriting my patience. What happened the night he died? I asked quietly. Vanessa's breathing became uneven. He went to meet them at Lake Lanier. That ugly feeling in my chest deepened. Everybody in Georgia knows Lake Lanier's reputation. Dark water. Sudden drop-offs. More deaths than people like talking about. He said they only wanted paperwork. But he called me around midnight. Her voice cracked completely. He sounded drunk. Or scared, maybe both. I remembered my own phone call with him that same night. If something happens to me, who controls the company? Dear God, he told me if the trust couldn't be transferred, they'd come after you next. The office suddenly felt colder. Not because of the threats, because Ethan knew. At the very end, my son finally understood why I built the trust in the first place. Not to control him, to protect the family. Then Vanessa whispered something that made my blood freeze solid. He recorded the meeting on the boat. I stared at her. What? He said if anything went wrong, he wanted proof. Outside the office, the hallway became silent again. Too silent. Like predators hearing wounded prey. Where's the recording? I demanded. Vanessa slowly looked toward the leather folder she'd brought into my office. And at that exact moment, the lights in the building went out. Darkness swallowed the office so fast it felt like the building itself stopped breathing. Vanessa gasped. Downstairs, somewhere in the warehouse, metal crashed against concrete. Then silence again. I gripped the revolver tighter and moved around the desk slowly, every instinct awake now. Emergency lights flickered faint red along the hallway outside, casting shadows under the office door. Whoever those men were, they'd killed the power intentionally. And that meant they were done pretending. Give me the folder, I whispered. Vanessa's hands shook as she passed it to me. Inside were account statements, insurance papers, copies of trust filings, and a black flash drive taped inside the cover. My pulse hammered. That's it? I asked. She nodded. He hid it in our kitchen vent before he left for the lake. Smart. Smarter than I'd given him credit for. From outside came the slow sound of footsteps approaching again. One man. Deliberate. Confident. Then the office door handle moved slightly, testing the lock. I motioned for Vanessa to stay quiet and plugged the flash drive into my office computer. The screen glowed to life. One video file, dated 3 nights earlier. I clicked it. At first the footage shook violently. Dark water, engine noise, Ethan breathing hard. Then voices. 3 men. One of them the same calm voice standing outside my office now. You lied to us, the man on the recording said. Ethan sounded desperate. I can get control eventually. That's not what our agreement said. I just need more time. Then came a loud crashing sound. The camera tilted sideways. And for one horrible second, I saw my son's face clearly. Terrified. Not drunk. Not reckless. Terrified. You told us the company belonged to you, the man said coldly. I thought it did. Silence. Then another voice. What about the father? My blood turned to ice. Ethan answered immediately. He doesn't know anything. I closed my eyes briefly. Even at the end, he tried protecting me. The recording continued. The first man spoke again. So here's what's going to happen. You bring us signed transfer authority by Friday, or your family starts suffering consequences. Then came sounds of struggling, shouting. The camera jerked wildly toward Blackwater, and Ethan screamed. The video cut out. Vanessa started sobbing beside me, but I barely heard her, because I finally understood everything. This wasn't about stealing the company anymore. These men had already realized the trust made legal ownership untouchable. What they wanted now was fear, pressure, access, a frightened old man willing to sign anything to protect what family he had left. Unfortunately for them, they misunderstood what kind of man built Walker Industrial Supply from nothing. The office handle rattled violently. Then a voice came through the darkness. Mr. Walker, the man said calmly, this ends one way or another tonight. I stood up slowly, and suddenly I wasn't 62 anymore. I was 28 years old again, unloading trucks at midnight beside my father while union guys threatened to burn our warehouse down if we didn't pay protection money. Back then, my father taught me something simple. The moment dangerous men realize you're afraid, you already lost. I removed the flash drive, put it into my pocket. Then I looked at Vanessa. Call 911, I said quietly. They'll kill us. Not tonight. The man outside slammed something heavy against the door. Wood cracked loudly. Once. Twice. I raised the revolver, and before the third hit landed, I shouted through the darkness. You should have done your homework before threatening my family. Silence outside. Then I gave them the truth I'd hidden for 10 years. The trust doesn't die with me, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Confused. Exactly what I wanted. Because Walker Industrial Supply had never belonged to me personally after the restructuring. Not legally, not financially, and certainly not in any way those men could seize. The controlling beneficiary of the trust was Ethan's 8-year-old daughter, Lily, my granddaughter, the only person on earth they could never force to sign anything. The hallway outside went completely quiet. No more pounding, no more threats, because finally, those men understood the same thing I did. They had killed a man for a business they could never own. Nobody broke the door down. That was the strangest part. One moment those men were hammering the office like they wanted blood, and the next silence. Complete silence. I kept the revolver aimed at the door for nearly a full minute before I finally heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. Fast. Controlled. Leaving. Vanessa stared at me in disbelief. They're gone. No, I said quietly. Men like that are never just gone. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. She collapsed into the chair across from my desk, crying into both hands now. Real crying this time, ugly and exhausted and human. The kind grief finally drags out of people after fear burns away. I looked down at the flash drive in my hand. My son's final moments. Proof. Confession. Warning. And somehow, hearing Ethan terrified on that recording hurt worse than seeing his coffin lowered into the ground earlier that day. Because parents tell themselves lies. We tell ourselves our children are safe, that they'll call if things get bad enough, that we'll notice when they're drowning. But Ethan had been drowning for months, and I never saw it. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then, the SUVs were gone. No fingerprints on the hallway doors. No weapons left behind. Professional cleanup. The kind detectives recognize immediately, but can rarely prove. I gave them the recording anyway. The officers listened in grim silence while rain hammered the warehouse windows. One detective, Martinez, tired eyes, gray mustache, finally looked at me and asked, "Why didn't your son come to you?" That question stayed with me longer than anything else. Not because I didn't know the answer, because I did. Ethan thought failure would disappoint me more than death. And maybe, over the years, I taught him that. 3 months later, federal investigators uncovered a laundering operation running through several fake logistics investment groups across Georgia and Tennessee. 2 men from the recording were arrested outside Birmingham. One disappeared completely. The newspapers called Ethan an unwilling participant in the fraud scheme. I hated that phrase. It sounded too clean, too forgiving. The truth was uglier. My son made terrible choices. He lied. moved money he shouldn't have touched, trusted dangerous people because he was desperate to prove himself. But he also tried to fix it before the end. And in the final moments of his life, he protected his family the only way he could. That mattered to me, more than the debt, more than the shame. Vanessa changed after everything came out. For weeks I expected manipulation, lawyers, demands for control of the company. Instead, one afternoon she showed up at my house wearing jeans and no makeup, carrying Lily asleep against her shoulder. "I don't want the money," she said quietly. I believed her. For the first time since the wedding, I actually believed her. Turns out fear can strip people down to who they really are. She admitted Ethan hid most of the financial mess from her until the very end. By the time she understood how dangerous things had become, they were already trapped. We sat on my back porch for nearly 2 hours while Lily slept inside. And for the first time, we mourned the same person instead of fighting over what he left behind. 6 months later, I stepped down as active CEO of Walker Industrial Supply. Not because I was tired, because I finally understood something my wife used to tell me constantly. If all you leave your family is money, you failed them. The trust stayed exactly as it was. Protected, untouchable, waiting for Lily someday, if she chooses to carry the business forward. But this time, there'll be rules. No secrets, no pride disguised as strength, and no child of mine growing up believing they have to earn love by becoming successful. Sometimes I still hear Ethan's voice from that final recording. "Dad, if something happens to me." For a long time, those words haunted me. Now they remind me of something else. The trust didn't save the business. Keeping my mouth shut didn't save my son. But in the end, it saved the last piece of my family I still had left.